Hello and welcome to another episode of this stadium review series, Review the 92. Each week, myself and co-host Tom go through a ground in the English 92 that we visited, talk about our experience and rank it in certain areas. Now, a couple of you had a guess down in the comments last week as to where we would be heading today, and you're absolutely right. It is an FA Cup giant killing. One of the biggest, or at the time, probably the biggest in a couple of decades, until Lincoln came along and ruined it a few years later, as a non-league side won away at a Premier League team. So we are, of course, talking about the 26th of January 2013, where we headed as Luton fans, after years of conference pain, to Norwich City, a Premier League side, with a line led by the England skipper now, and got the most famous result of 25 years in the FA Cup. And there is no bias in that at all. It is statistically proven. So we are going to try and avoid bias today, and it's probably going to be the hardest one because as a match day experience, I don't know about you, but it's certainly my favourite game that I've ever watched in the flesh. But I don't know about stadium, whether I can be fair based on that. But I'll try my best. So firstly, if you're looking forward to this one, please do put a thumbs up on it. Subscribe for a weekly episode from this series. But we've got to talk about Carrow Road. So I'll do the stats quickly, and then I'll get Tom's opinion on the ground and the day first and foremost. So Carrow Road, a capacity of 27,244, built and opened in 1935. So an old ground, but still slightly more modern than most we've had in this series. And a record attendance, two figures here. The first one overall, which is 43,984 for an FA Cup game against Leicester in 1963. But the seated capacity or the seated record attendance is 27,137, which was for a Premier League match against Newcastle in 2016. I'm guessing due to probably the big 5 or 6 at the time, there being more segregation or whatever else. But either way, we're only talking about Luton v Norwich. So tell me your initial experience of the weekend as it was and the game itself.
Well, as football weekends go, it takes some beating, doesn't it? It was incredible. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there were 3 of us for a change, not just the 2 of us.
And the other one wasn't a football fan.
No, but he sure became one. As we've kind of drifted away, haven't we? We've gone in different directions, so we're not as close to him as we used to be. But yeah, around that age, like late teens, 20, we watched a few games in pubs, and he came along with us to Norwich as he had studied in the area, and he knew it. Yep. He knew Norwich, so he was willing to drive us, which is convenient as neither of us drive. And Norwich isn't the easiest place to get to on public transport.
Easier so now, but was even harder at the time.
It worked out well. And yeah, he totally bought into it and became a bit of a hooligan for the day. And I think we all had a fantastic trip. Obviously didn't expect anything from the game itself, so that was the cherry on top.
You've hit the nail on the head, really, which is basically, as long-suffering conference fans at that point, we went to enjoy a big day out for the first time in a long time, which was an experience of a weekend, going to a new ground. It was long before we wanted to do the 92. But Luton weren't even in the Football League then, so it wasn't going to be possible for me following Luton. But the game exceeded all expectations. The weekend exceeded all expectations. So I guess we better talk about the game a little bit, the 4 areas a bit, and I'm sure it will join into some of the weekend experiences too. So it was a Norwich side, don't forget at the time, led by Chris Hughton. We mentioned Harry Kane up front. There was Leon Barnett, a former Luton player in there, and plenty of other international household names too. But that didn't stop Luton winning 1-0, despite probably one of our most average lineups you could ever name. Andre Gray, I guess, probably being the exception now. But talk to me about the atmosphere of the ground, because it was almost a sellout. There were 26,521 fans there, including 4,000 from Luton. And even the Norwich end, we have to be fair, despite being a 10 quid game, having loads of younger fans in, it was still a good atmosphere.
Yeah, it was. And again, that's something that does stick in my mind from the day, is we were positioned quite near the Norwich fans, close enough that there was some stick and banter going back and forth. And again, our other mate, I think, preferred to watch that and get involved in that more than watching the game. There was a good atmosphere. It felt proper. Yeah, late January Cup. Was the 3rd round?
Fourth round. We'd just beaten Wolves at home beforehand.
So yeah, up for the cup. It was a good atmosphere.
Yeah, really good.
Obviously I could never memorise the attendance off by heart, but I don't recall there being empty seats. It did feel like people had turned out in numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only reason it wasn't closer to its record attendance is because with the large Luton following, they'd put quite a bit of segregation in that stand. Otherwise, I think we probably would have been chasing the record attendance, because I'm sure more Luton fans would have come if they could. They're normally well followed anyway.
Yeah, it's the east of the country, isn't it? It's not easy to get to, but it's not the longest away journey in the country. So yeah, I think, and again, as you said, like after being starved of going to big grounds for so long, we'd been in the conference a few seasons by then. So you could say Luton were an established conference side by that point, and they're probably the starting 11. No disrespect.
Does reflect it in areas.
It does reflect that, yeah. So I think a lot of Luton fans would have come out for a big game, definitely, if there had been availability of tickets.
Yeah, I mean, we have to bear in mind to the atmosphere as well, the extenuating circumstances that could have made it worse, which is the fact that luckily we were staying there all weekend from Friday to Sunday. But on Saturday morning, we woke up to a blanket of snow that had turned to ice. There was doubt about the game for a little while. I mean, it was a horrific walk, not because it was a bad walk, but because the ground was just the most slippery conditions you've ever seen. Yeah. And I made the mistake of wearing a T-shirt as a petulant teenager, or a 20-year-old at the time then, which didn't work out quite well. No, I was still a teenager.
Yeah.
It was you who was 20. So that was
last few months of being a teenager.
Yeah, so those are the sort of things that you would think, home fans for a Premier League side at the time, do they really want to turn up? I know the prices were good, but they did, and you've got to be fair to them with that.
Yeah, can't complain. And now you're saying it, I'm just thinking of the walk. I think there was a bit of a slope down to the ground.
Yeah.
You just thought, someone is going to go flying. Treacherous.
What about the ranking? I'm going to make you go first this time because I don't want to be considered to be biased, so I'm going to let you be the voice of reason before I start.
Atmosphere first?
Yeah.
We're going to go... I'll give it an 8 for that, I think.
I think you've done pretty well there. I'm going to be even fairer and give it a 9, just because the away end was very boisterous. And the home crowd, again, I mentioned this with Newcastle last week, it's more than I expected for the game. They're at home to a fifth-tier side, and they're producing that atmosphere. That's something special in my experience, considering we're separated by a weird hotel in the corner, which we'll get to later. That was a really special game for me, and the Norwich fans played their part in that, despite being behind to Luton near the end.
Yeah, again, they are a well-supported team, aren't they? They've got the celebrity fans, haven't they? The Stephen Fry's, the Ed Bulls, Delia Smiths, Jake Humphrey. They've got it's a big catchment area, isn't it? Again, like we said, about kind of similar to Carlisle in that sense. It's a rural part of the country, which hasn't got many football teams in the area. So I guess and if you're into football and you within a 50-mile radius, you're probably going to go to Norwich.
Well, that's it. It's only Norwich or Ipswich, isn't it? Around there, the only two. So
you take it, and fair play. They did come, even though they were playing, at the time was a conference team, but next season we'll be in the same division.
Hopefully. Let's not get too excited just yet. However, and by the time this comes out, Luton will have played Reading, and you could look silly for saying
Could have egg on my face, couldn't I?
But let's move on to location. So the ground, as we say, it wasn't a terrible walk. But given the conditions, it became a terrible walk. We were quite a way away from the ground because we were staying in the city centre. So it's not in the most central location. But I don't remember anything being disastrous other than the weather, which suggests to me that it's not bad. There weren't any big uphills apart from the way back. And I guess we're a little bit warped on this because we didn't have to do the travel after. We were staying in a hotel. So once we did our walk, that was it.
I haven't got, a real clear picture in my head of how long the walk was or the route. I think it was quite a nice walk. I think it was quite leafy, quite green. But yeah, I do remember there being obviously ice on the ground. I would say that I'm quite annoyed with us that we didn't see more of Norwich. I've heard that Norwich is a really nice city, and I just think we just kind of walked along the high street. I think we went did we go to a Wetherspoons the night before? Kind of like that kind of.
Possibly.
I don't remember. I think we went to a pub, but we just didn't see it. And I would like to go back to Norwich because I know people think it's a really nice place. And
I guess the weather did again play its part in that, because I presumed if it had been a sunny weekend, we probably would have gone and explored a little bit more than we perhaps did at that time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess again, our third friend probably isn't the kind of person that would be into that kind of thing.
You're politely saying not cultured.
In as many words, yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say.
So as you've said that, I've just checked the length of the walk. In normal conditions, without ice all over the ground and stretching thinly, it's 20 minutes. So not bad, no hills. We can't complain about that. And obviously, as part of the location, we have to bear in mind that, as you say, the city centre is a nice place full of lovely restaurants, pubs. We went to a Mexican restaurant in the evening. As you mentioned, we'd been to other pubs and that during the day. So I don't think we can rank it down really that much. I'm happy to go with your first score for atmosphere, which is an 8.
Yeah, I think another 8's coming from me as well. 20-minute walk is fine, isn't it? And it was,
Yeah.
as I said, going back 7.5 years, and this was before we really were paying attention to the match day experience. So, which is quite, again, I'm annoyed with. I wasn't my eyes weren't as open as they are these days to these little things, intricacies of going to a football game. But yeah, an 8's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Move on to value. Now, this one's probably the most controversial one that we've had so far. And I don't know if you'll remember this because you probably weren't worrying so much at the time about that. The game prices were £10 for adults and £1 for kids. And Luton actually complained about these prices because obviously for FA Cup ties, the revenue is split 50-50 rather than home and away. So as a result, Luton on their biggest day after 4 years in the conference lost out on hundreds of thousands of pounds because of the ticket pricing. And obviously Luton fans will have paid 20, 25 quid to go. But for Norwich fans, you can see why it was a tenner. But it caused a little bit of debate because of that. And there were actually articles in the national press about it being too cheap and whatever. So for us, as a point of view of value for money, it was exceptional, but it doesn't help non-league and lower league clubs. Although, would they have got 26,000 without that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a dilemma. I don't have no recollection of that story, but it does make sense. You think when you get the ties coming out, you always think, oh, they want a big trip to an Old Trafford or an Anfield, don't they? They want that payday. And I guess, and obviously, Carrow Road is not on that scale, but yeah, it's a payday, especially for a non-league club. And what do? Do you get bums on seats, give cheap tickets away, and make it a spectacle, or do you try and add a few more quid on, try and rinse the money, but then you're taking a chance that people won't turn up? I think I would go the way they went. I think cheaper tickets, fill it up, and everyone wants to see that, don't they? It just adds ammunition to those that say the FA Cup's lost its magic when they see empty stadiums. I would much rather you have fans in grounds for FA Cup games.
I'm so glad you said that because that's the first thing for me is I don't think lower league and non-league clubs can say that the top clubs aren't treating it seriously and it's losing their magic if then they want expensive prices to get the money in that's going to cause half-empty stadiums. So it's a double-edged sword, but you can't have it both ways. So I've got no problem with what Norwich did. I'm sure if Luton knew they were going to win the game, they probably wouldn't have cared because then they got another big home tie with a sellout that was on TV. In the third round, they'd had a sellout at home to Wolves. So I'm sure they weren't going to complain if they knew they were winning. But I can understand the reasoning at the time, but it doesn't make it right. In my opinion, the pricing's fine. And for us, the same as Newcastle, 2 weeks in a row, I have to match 10 with 10.
Yeah, that's what I said. Give 10 for a 10. Can't beat it, can you? £10 to see a football game is a dream, and especially one that turned out as it did. So yeah, I'd pay £10 for that all day long.
And I mean, the Norwich one for me is even probably, I know it isn't in the grand scheme of things on paper, for me was better than the Newcastle one being a tenner because at that point I'd been spending over a tenner to go to Eastbourne and Alfreton and God knows what other places, Salisbury. So I think for me it was even more special to then go to Norwich for a tenner and see a Premier League ground that's completely packed as well. So
yeah.
All I can say is fair play to Norwich.
Yeah, I'm going to sound quite like sentimental, romantic about it, but like, what does £10 really buy you? Not much. £10 has got us a memory, like a trip out, a day out with mates that we'll keep like forever. It sounds very cheesy to say that, but that's the magic, isn't it? £10. You don't know what you're going to get when you go to live football, and that's why we love it. And for every Norwich, you get 10 Wigans before lockdown. That you forget the second you come out the ground. Horrible game of football. But we just live for those days out that stick with you forever.
And it's a good point you make there as well, because that £10 wouldn't have covered the round of drinks we got the night before in the pub, wouldn't have covered any of our meals in the restaurant afterwards. So it shows you the value you're getting. And for that, for me, as I'll mention later on again, it's still my favourite football game I've attended. That's not bad for a tenner, I don't think. So I'd give it more than 10 if I could, I think.
Yeah, has to be top marks. I
And then
agree.
we move on to character. Now, this is an interesting one because its unique features are certainly, well, were unique at the time, but are a little bit strange, which, as we've mentioned, is a hotel in the corner of the ground, a Holiday Inn. Not the hotel we stayed in, because we certainly couldn't be affording a pitch view there. But it's a fairly unique feature. There are a lot of the modern bowls now that, like the MK Dons is a great example, that has a hotel built in around the corporate areas, so you can sit out, you can spend more and get a pitch side view. But the Norwich one just lobbed in the corner, looking completely out of place with a few windows over the pitch, is probably a little bit more unique, I would say.
Yeah, you think it's not been done as well as it could have been. Like talking different sport, but you've looked at rooms. I think Headingley,
Yeah,
about just 2 minutes from my flat. They've got, I think there's a hotel, isn't there? You can get pitch views, and it looks well done. You get I think you get a balcony, don't you? And you can watch the game. And from what I remember at Norwich, it's kind of awkwardly positioned on the corner of the stand, and yeah, it looks a bit out of place, doesn't it?
but I want to make a counter argument on that, which is the ones like you mentioned with balconies in the middle of the ground, and the ones like MK Don's another example of that, obviously, is when you've got a ground and it's got those big gaps to seat a two-person balcony or to host a hotel window, does that not take away from the atmosphere? Whereas, as much as it doesn't look as great, just slobbed in the corner of the ground, it took absolutely nothing away from the atmosphere, didn't disrupt the atmosphere between the home and away fans, because the stands, you could still see each other. You were basically, it was still close to the pitch, it was fairly tight in, it was still an old school ground, which I quite liked, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not condoning it. I don't personally see the need to have a hotel at a football ground. Like,
It's
I'm sure.
financial, isn't it? Obviously.
Yeah, like I don't want to see that again. I think that's moving away from traditional like old football, and it's again all about like money, money, money. Which, yeah, I'm not saying it's a good thing that Milton Keynes or Headingley has that, but just did seem a bit awkward at Norwich. But yeah, you're right. It didn't ruin or interrupt anything about the football. You could still see everything, and as I said before, there was some stick going back and forth between the away fans and the home support to our right. So yeah, it didn't ruin anything, and I did like Carrow Road. And going back from what you said in the introduction, 1930 odd it was constructed,
Yep.
which is
It looks
throughout
modern,
the
doesn't it?
series. Throughout the series, you've been saying like most of them have been kind of like more modern or turn of the century, or like Kenilworth Road, almost like way older than that. So that's, yeah, it's kind of seems like it's a unique time to have constructed a football ground just before the Second World War and all that. So I did like Carrow Road.
And you've got to be fair, it still had all the other features we like. The rest of the corners, you could see out into the city behind it. I mean, the stands themselves are lovely. I've got something for the ground because it's, you don't often see a ground that's filled with yellow seats. I mean, it's got something about it, hasn't it? It's a bit different. For us, of course, it was more special. It's the first big one that we'd been able to visit in years. I know you'd followed Arsenal a few times away from home, but for a Luton fan, it probably made the day more special and made it more difficult, to be fair. But for me, character wise, I really like the ground and I'd love to go back, which I've said for a fair few.
Yeah, yeah, you make a good point about the yellow seats. It's quite a distinct feature, isn't it? Obviously,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Canaries, that isn't Norwich colours are quite iconic, and yeah, the whole ground yellow is special. I will for character. Let's get to the scores then. For character, I'll give it. I'm gonna be consistent. I think I'll give it another 8.
I'm again, like most of these, I'm torn between 8 and 9, but I'm mindful that I'll be giving it a score higher than some of the other grounds that I probably like as much, just because of the experience. So I'm going to stick with you on this one, and I'm going to go for an 8 as well, just because it probably didn't have that. And I know we've mentioned it before. I know the yellow seats and that made it look a spectacle, but it's not a complete wow factor. But it's a very lovely ground, and I would more than happily go and watch football there every week if I lived locally.
Yeah, again, I think I've said this many times. If Luton had that ground, I'd be very content. It's a 27,000 seater. That's ideal for that kind of stature of club, and it's fine. It does the job without having that. Wow, something that again, this is my example. you don't want to get your phone out and take a picture of it. It's not like there's that thing that just draws your attention, that just grabs you.
And to be fair, on that day, even if there had been, it would have been too cold, so we wouldn't have done it because it was absolutely bloody freezing. I guess the final thing to say is Norwich, obviously a well-run club, a really nice ground overall. Of course, if you've visited for a slightly more regular game, I guess, then please do let us know in the comments your opinion, if you've had any problems there, or if you've noticed any unique features that we might have missed out, because it was about -5 degrees, so we didn't go on a ground tour. But if you did enjoy this episode, please do put a thumbs up on it. Our overall scores will be down below, which you can either annihilate or agree with. Subscribe to the channel for a weekly episode from this series, as well as daily FM20 content. Thank you to Tom, my co-host, for joining me as always.
Cheers.
And we'll see you next time.